Hello, humans. Welcome back to Your Thoughts Are Valid, and I hope you all are doing great. So, we are continuing with the unit third of health psychology, which is stress, lifestyle disorders, and its management. So, this is the part 11 of Crash Course of Health Psychology. So, let's start with the video. So, the topics we are going to cover today include coping. So, in coping, we will understand what coping is, then what are the ways of coping, and about social support. So let's start. Coping is defined as the thoughts and behaviors used to manage the internal and external demands of situations that are appraised as stressful. So these coping is basically like how to manage our thoughts and behaviors so that we can actually, cope. Basically, we can deal with the internal demands of ourselves and external demands from the surroundings that are appraised. So to manage those stressful events or basically our thoughts and behaviors to thrive in the tough situations that comes under coping. Coping has several important characteristics. First is the relationship between coping and a stressful event is a dynamic process. Okay. Coping is basically like a series of transactions between a person who has a set of resources, values, commitments, and a particular environment with its own resources, demands, and constraints. Okay. So transactions between the resources a person has and the resources in the environment. So it is a series of transactions between these two things. Second important aspect is breadth. Emotional reactions, including anger or depression, are part of the coping process, as are actions that are voluntarily undertaken to confront the event. Okay, so in like we said that second important aspect is breadth. So in breadth, we talked about emotional reactions, which can be anger or depression. They are also the part of coping process because these are that actions that are voluntarily undertaken so that one can confront the event. Okay, so we learned about two important characteristics of coping. First, we understood that coping and a stressful event relationship between both of these is a dynamic process because it's like a series of transaction between a person who has set of resources and the resources in the environment. And second aspect we understood is its breadth. And in breadth, we understood that emotional reactions, including anger or depression, are part of the coping process, as are the actions that are voluntarily undertaken to confront the event. Moving on, the personality characteristics that each person brings to a stressful event influence how he or she will cope with that event. Okay, the personality characteristics basically defines the perspective of a person. So basically how a person views a particular event or any stressful event will influence how he or she is going to cope with that event. People high in negative affectivity, or we can say neuroticism, express distress, discomfort, and dissatisfaction in many situations. Negative affectivity or neuroticism is related to poor health, including such chronic disorders as arthritis, diabetes, chronic pain, and coronary artery disease. Neuroticism coupled with social inhibition and isolation is an especially toxic combination for health. Positive emotional states have been tied to lower levels of stress indicators such as cortisol and better immune responses to challenges such as exposure to a flu virus. So here we understood about people who have high negativity. Uh, they express distress, discomfort in many situations, and neuroticism is related to poor health. Neuroticism and people who are high in neuroticism, if they are indulging in activities of isolation or social inhibition, it becomes a toxic combination for their health. And then positive emotional states have been tied to lower levels of stress indicators such as cortisol and better immune responses. Now let's move on. So let's move on to psychosocial resources. What are psychosocial resources? First one is optimism. An optimistic nature can help people cope more effectively with stress and reduce their risk for illness. Optimism also promotes active and persistent coping efforts, which improves long-term prospects for psychological and physical health. So we have studied about optimism in detail in one of the in the video of health enhancing behaviors. So here I won't go in detail. Then let's move on to the second psychosocial resource, which is psychological control. So psychological control is the belief that one can determine one's own behavior, influence one's environment, and bring about desired outcomes. The belief that one can exert control over stressful events has long been known to help people cope with stress. Then, third one is self-esteem. High self-esteem is tied to effective coping. It seems to be most productive at low levels of stress. At higher levels of stress, the stressful events themselves can overwhelm the benefits of self-esteem. Then there is resilience. Although we have studied about resilience before, let's just revise it in short. Psychological resources such as these not only enable people to confront and cope with the stresses, they also help them bounce back from bad experiences and adapt flexibility to the changing demands of the stressful situations. And this process is called resilience. In addition to these personality resources, taking opportunities for rest, relaxation, and renewal help people cope more effectively with stressors. Being able to feel positive emotions even when going through intense stressors is a coping method that resilient people draw on. Then let's move on. What is coping style? Coping style is a propensity to deal with stressful events in a particular way. Okay, so basically, the style or the method in which we deal with a stressful event, that is called coping style. Like approach versus avoidance. Some people cope with a threatening event with an avoidant. Means minimizing coping style, whereas others use an approach which means confrontative or vigilant coping style by gathering information or taking direct action. Okay, so you have seen when someone faces a difficult situation, they either avoid it or they either approach it. They are either like, okay, let's just leave it, or they are like, okay, let's just do it, we will see whatever may come. Then people who cope with threatening events through approach may pay a short-term price in anxiety and physiological reactivity as they confront stressful events, but be better off in the long term. People who cope with stress by minimizing or avoiding threatening events may deal effectively with short-term threats. However, if stress persists over time, avoidance is not as successful. Those who cope through avoidant coping strategies faced worse psychologically over the fared worse psychologically over the long term compared to those who used more active coping strategies. Then let's move on. Problem focused and emotion focused coping. Problem focused coping involves attempt to do something constructive about the stressful conditions that are harming, threatening, or challenging an individual. Emotion focused coping involves efforts to regulate emotions experienced due to the stressful event. So we learned about this problem focused and emotion focused coping in transactional model of stress given by Lazarus. So I won't be going in too much detail because there I have explained in detail. So this part is already covered. I'm just revising it here. So typically people use both problem focused and emotion focused coping to manage stressful events, suggesting that both types of coping are useful. The nature of the event also contributes to which coping strategies will be used. For example, work related problem benefit from problem focused coping, such as taking direct action or seeking help from others. Health problems, in contrast, lead to more emotion focused coping, perhaps because health threats often must be tolerated but may not be amenable to direct action. Overall, situations in which something constructive can be done will favor problem focused coping, whereas those situations that simply must be accepted favor emotion focused coping. So, I hope this one is clear. Moving on, emotional approach coping. An important type of emotional coping is emotional approach coping, which involves clarifying, focusing on, and working through the emotions experienced in response to a stressor. Emotional approach coping involves adjustment to many chronic conditions, including chronic pain and medical conditions such as pregnancy and breast cancer. Even managing the stress of daily life can benefit from emotional approach coping. Then there is proactive coping. Much coping is proactive, that is, people anticipate potential stressors and act in advance either to prevent them or to reduce their impact. Proactive coping requires first the abilities to anticipate or detect potential stressors, second, coping skills for managing them, and third, self regulatory skills, which are the ways that people control, direct, and correct their actions as they attempt to counter potential stressful events. Proactive coping has been understudied because, by definition, if stressors are headed off in advance or reduced, they are less likely to occur or be experienced as intensely stressful. Then coping and external resources. Coping is influenced not only by internal resources a person brings to a stressors, such as resources and coping style, but also external resources. These include time, money, education, decent job, family, standard of living, absence of other life stressors, etc. People with greater resources typically cope with stressful events better because time, money, friends, and other resources simply provide more ways of dealing with a stressful event. One of the most potent external resource with respect to health is socioeconomic status. People who are high in socioeconomic status have fewer medical and psychiatric disorders of all kinds, and they show lower mortality from all causes of death. So strong is this relationship that even in animals, higher status animals are less vulnerable to infection than lower status animals. Moving on, coping outcomes. Health psychology typically assess whether the following outcomes have been achieved: reducing or eliminating stressors, tolerating or adjusting to negative events or realities, maintaining a positive self image, maintaining emotional equilibrium, continuing satisfying relationship with others, enhancing the prospects of recovery if one is ill, keeping physiological, neuroendocrine, and immune reactivity relatively low, or restoring these systems to pre stress levels. Then let's understand some coping interventions. First, let's understand mindfulness, meditation, and acceptance or commitment therapy. Mindfulness meditation teaches people to strive for a state of mind marked by heightened awareness of the present, focusing on the moment and accepting and acknowledging it without becoming distracted or distressed by stress. Mindfulness can improve quality of life, reduce anxiety, and improve coping, and so it has been the basis of interventions. Mindfulness based stress reduction is a systematic training in mindfulness to help people manage their reactions to stress and the negative emotions that may result. Thus, the goal of mindfulness meditation is to help people approach stressful situations mindfully rather than reacting to them automatically. Mindfulness and MBSR can mute biological responses to stress as well. Similar to MBSR, acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT, is a CBT technique that incorporates acceptance of a problem, mindfulness regarding its occurrence, and the conditions that elicit it, and commitment to behavior change. Goal of ACT is to try to change private experiences and thereby maintain commitment. ACT does not challenge thoughts directly, but instead teaches people to notice their thoughts in a mindful manner and from a distance so as to be able to respond more flexibly to them. Acceptance and mindfulness therapies can improve the quality of life while people are coming to grips with the stressors they experience. Moving on, self affirmation, another coping intervention. When people positively affirm their values, they feel better about themselves and show lower physiological activity and distress. Self affirmation can be used as an intervention to help people cope with the stress. Self affirmation can also undermine defensive reactions to threats. Relaxation tech training, another coping intervention. So this affects the physiological experience of stress by reducing arousal. Relaxation therapies include deep breathing, progressive muscle relaxation training, guided imagery, transcendental meditation, yoga, and self-hypnosis. These techniques can reduce heart rate, muscle tension, blood pressure, inflammatory activity, lipid levels, anxiety, and tension, among other physical and psychological benefits. Yoga may have health benefits. One study found that people who regularly practiced yoga experienced more positive emotions and showed lower inflammatory responses to stress and than those who were new to the practice. Yoga then may ameliorate the burden that stress places on an individual. Joyful music can also be a relaxing stress buster. Then coping skills training. Most of these interventions draw on principles from CBT. Coping effectiveness training typically begins by teaching people how to appraise stressful events and disaggregate the stressors into specific tasks. The person learns to distinguish those aspects of a stressor that may be changeable from those that are not. Specific coping strategies are then practiced to deal with these specific stressors. Encouraging people to maintain their social support is also an important aspect of coping effectiveness training. Then let's come to the last the last topic we have to study for this particular video is social support. Social support is defined as information from others that one is loved and cared for, esteemed and valued, and part of a network of communication and mutual obligations. Social support can come from parents, spouse or partner, other relatives, friends, social and community contacts, or even a devoted pet. Social support help people thrive. People with social support experience less stress when they confront a stressful experience, cope with it more successfully, and even experience positive life events more positively. Not having social support in times of need is stressful, and social isolation and loneliness are powerful predictors of health and longevity. For example, elderly, the recently widowed, and victims of sudden, severe, uncontrollable life events may need support but have difficulty getting it. People who have difficulty with social relationships, such as the chronically shy or those who anticipate rejection by others, are at risk for isolating themselves socially. Just as social support has health benefits, loneliness and social isolation have risks for physical, cognitive, and emotional functioning. Social support can take any of several forms. Tangible assistance involves provision of material support such as services, financial assistance, goods. For example, gift of food that often arrive after a death in a family mean that the bereaved family members will not have to cook for themselves and visiting friends and family. Family and friends can provide informational support about a stressful events. For example, if an individual is facing an uncomfortable medical procedure, a friend who went through the same thing could provide information about the exact steps involved, potential discomfort experienced, and how long it takes. Supportive friends and family can provide emotional support by reassuring the person that he or she is valuable individual who is cared for. Warmth and nurturance provided by other people can enable a person under stress to approach the stressful event with greater assurance. Many of the benefits of social support come from being socially integrated and from the perception that social support is available. Simply believing that support is available or contemplating the sources of support one typically has in life can yield beneficial effects. Effects of social support on illness. Social support can lower the likelihood of illness, speed recovery from illness or treatment, and reduce the risk of mortality due to serious disease. People with high levels of social support are more adherent to their medical regimens and they are more likely to use health services. However, social support can lead to some bad health habits, as when one's peer group is smokes, drinks heavily, or take drugs, or when a lot of social contact is coupled with stress. Under these circumstances, risk of minor illnesses such as colds or flus may actually increase because of contagion through the social network. Lonely and socially isolated people have poorer health and experience more adverse symptoms on a daily basis. They also practice poorer health habits, which may contribute to risk for poor health. Moderation of stress by social support. Social support is generally beneficial during non stressful as well as stressful times. Physical and mental health benefits of social support are chiefly evident during periods of high stress. When there is little stress, social support may offer few such benefits. According to this viewpoint, social support acts as a reserve and resource that blunt the effects of stress when it is at high levels. Extracting support. The effectiveness of social support depends on how an individual uses a social support network. Some people are better than others at extracting the support they need. During periods of high stress, genetic predispositions to draw on social support network may be activated, leading to the perception that support will be available to mute stress. Social skills influence the ability to develop social support as well. Giving social support. Giving social support to other has beneficial effects on mental and physical health as well. People who provided instrumental support to friends, relatives, and neighbors, or who provided emotional support to their spouses, were less likely to die over the next 5 years. Then, enhancing social support. Health psychologists view social support as an important resource in primary prevention. Networking may be an added source of social support for people, but those who use it to express distress may drive others away. A number of interventions have been undertaken to try to reduce loneliness. Some of these focus on improving social skills, whereas others attempt to enhance existing social support. Social support groups and internet-based social support interventions show promise for enhancing access to socially supportive resources. Some focus on getting people to increase their opportunities for social contact, and others address the maladaptive internal monologues that people sometimes generate about themselves and their social adeptness that can drive other people away. Loneliness is often an emotional state rather than purely a consequence of little social contact. Poor quality of sleep and anxiety can lead to depression, negative social cognitions, and further loneliness. So that is it for today's video. I hope this is clear. This is actually quite simple. So I think this must have been clear to you. If you have any doubt, please do ask in the comment section. And thank you so much for watching. I will see you all in the next video.